Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unapologetically Audacious Podcast. I have an incredible episode lined up for you today. I have an incredible guest who embodies everything that we stand for here on the podcast. So, the question I have for you is if you're somebody who has this mentality or finds themselves saying, I'll be happy when, or maybe you fall off the wagon a couple times more than you'd like, or maybe you have self sabotaging behaviors and beliefs. Our guest here is going to unpack everything for you. You might know her from her work, her TED Talk, her incredible debut book that she authored. Amazing. Ladies and gents, I'm so excited to welcome Sonia. Sonia, thank you so
Hi.
much for
Oh
coming.
my goodness, thank you. And what an introduction. I had a morning with my kids. It was pretty rough and tough. And so thank you for reminding me that I'm a human being outside of being an exhausted mom.
You are absolutely a human being. And it's so funny how this is such a full circle moment because I met you years ago when I first started my journey in
Yeah.
media for this social media company at Lavelle. And I say this so genuinely that when I had met you, I was so struck by you. I was
Oh,
like, wow. And it was your energy for me. And it was so many different things. And I didn't quite know what it was until this now moment after reading your book. And it was that's it. That's
oh,
why. And
oh,
so over the years, I have, continued to follow and I really do align and resonate with you so much.
oh, you're so
And
sweet. Thank you.
you wrote your book and congratulations. I'll start again tomorrow and all the other lies I told myself. I really feel like, and I was telling you before, this is something that I feel like it's timeless. Every woman of any age needs this book in their hands. They need it on their bedside table. So when they're feeling, a certain way or maybe like they're not enough, they just have to open up that chapter again and
Yeah.
reread it.
Yeah. I think that was certainly the hope that, by sort of making the book a combination of my personal stories and some really digestible takeaways that people could use the book as an ongoing support mechanism so that they could just feel less alone on their journeys. And so I
Yeah.
love that came through. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even before reading it, I knew I wanted to have you on here and unpack so many different themes, which you laid out so eloquently and beautifully and simply in your book. So I want to dive in. The first thing I want to talk about is your mission really is to inspire women, individuals, but also help them reach self-actualization.
Yes.
And part of that is really understanding in a way authenticity, right? It all
Yes.
kind of starts with you and you really emphasize a lot in your book values.
Yes.
So, before we get to that, the first question I have for you is what does freedom and happiness mean to you?
Oh, she's going there. She's just okay. Here we go. Freedom and happiness. Honestly, I think for me, happiness is freedom, and freedom feels like happiness. I think, um, what I thought was going to make me happy in my lifetime used to be centering around everything outside of me, right? It was like if I can get the things and have the job and have the husband and have the life, if I can achieve, then I'm going to get to a place where I'm finally happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as I've evolved throughout my journey and I've grown and I've really started to do the deeper, more meaningful work, what I've realized is that the only moments that I can really feel authentically happy or content or fulfilled are those moments where I feel the most free to be who I really am at my deepest core, that I'm moving with alignment and that there is that synchronicity of me co-creating with the universe, right? And so I think once upon a time I would have been like, "Oh, freedom is over here," and then happiness involves other things. Now I'm like, happiness is feeling intrinsically free?
Mm-hmm. So beautiful. And can you unpack a little bit more when that journey started? I know you went through something very transformational at 21.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I graduated university, sort of having accomplished some big goals, had landed the job of my dreams as an executive at IBM and was engaged to an older man. We were going to get married very quickly after I was done university. And I think in that last year of university, I really started to have the beginning of an awakening, sort of starting to feel the disconnect between this life I had built, this relationship that I was in, and how I really felt on the inside. And to make a long story short, I got to the stage where I knew that I had to call off the wedding. And it was a big, fat Indian wedding. It was going to have, like 800 people, and all of our family was going to be coming from India. It was a big production. And I called it off 2 weeks before. And it was one of the most challenging experiences of my life, because to try and stop the train that had left the station so many months and frankly so many years before was challenging. It was a lot, and it really called into question everything I had believed up until that point, everything I was going to choose to believe going forward. And it was the point where I think I really had to tap into some very serious bravery and courage. Um, but then I made it through, and I think that inflection point for me was so critical because it was the first moment in my life where I really took a step towards taking responsibility for my own happiness, for my own life, for my own sense of being. And it was the start of what would come next, right? The quitting of my corporate career, surviving the infertility journey for both kids, you know, being married and going through the journey of what that really involves over the course of the last 14 years, right? I think it was just unknowingly me stepping into the arena of authenticity for the first time. And it has been a wild ride ever since.
Your journey is so inspiring and so relatable. And all those things that you went through are what has led you to this very moment
Mm,
and is providing you with the tools and the ability to help and inspire so many women today. So it was
yeah,
so essential.
so essential.
And the bravery that you have is so admirable, and being able to do that. And I'm sure that there are so many listeners and viewers today who can relate to that so much, so much. So
I
kudos
hope
to
so.
you.
Yeah.
There are myself included. What did the road to authenticity look like after that? Once you quit that corporate job, once you called that off, what did that look like?
I think it's sort of interesting, right? It's like I called off the wedding. I took, about a year to really find my footing again. It was a time where there was a lot of momentum with my new career working at IBM. There was a lot of excitement. And also I was healing from a really difficult chapter. And so the beginning of it was really just settling into this new phase of, once again being single, once again starting to feel like, okay, I'm going to be carving out a new path, really leaning into my job. Um, my now husband and I started dating at some point in time, and that was, its own journey of having all the feelings and learning to trust again and learning to trust my own um, interpretations of love again, because I had made such a big mistake the first time. There was fear, and there was just a lot of second guessing at that time. And so I think the first phase of me cultivating authenticity wasn't really anything other than starting to just let myself settle into my skin again as an adult, as somebody who was done university and finally making money and carving out a new way forward. And then that's when the next iteration really started. That's when I started to feel the dissonance between the career that I was pursuing and who I really was. And I couldn't really pinpoint what it was. I had the job, I had the money, I had the penthouse downtown, I had the husband who was becoming a neurosurgeon. Like I had satisfied all the ticky marks and I believed in all the ticky marks. And yet I found myself every day just sort of waking up with this like twinge inside that was like, I don't know, I don't feel so good, but I don't have a reason not to feel good. I have
Mhm.
everything that I ever wanted. I called off the wedding. I put my life on track. Like I got it all. So then what's the problem now? And every day that I would wake up, it just sort of became, a little bit more intense, a little bit more tangible, that longing feeling like I don't feel good and this doesn't make sense. And also, this can't be as good as I get to feel in my life, right? Like they had told me that if I did all the things and I got myself to the place where I had the ticky mark satisfied, that I'd finally get to feel happy. And I think I was waking up every day being like, I really don't think this is what happy is supposed to feel like. I really don't think that this is what that fight was for. And so I didn't really know where to go. I didn't really know where to turn. I didn't have any answers. And I was like, okay, well, then if it's not this job, then maybe I find another job. If it's not feeling good this way, maybe I find something else out there that's going to make me feel
Yeah.
good enough when I look in the mirror every morning. And so in true brown girl fashion, I decided to pursue more education. I got my executive MBA while I was still working at IBM, and then I quit IBM and started to work at a new technology company that was smaller because I was like, oh, maybe it's just that I need something more dynamic. And very quickly, I realized that it's not going to cut it. Nothing about the pursuit of this career is going to move me in the direction of finally figuring out how I get to feel the way I want to feel. And when I didn't know what else to do, I started to have a very quiet aha moment where I was like, you're never going to feel the way you want to feel if you can't look in the mirror and stop picking yourself apart as a problem to be fixed, whether it's your love handles or your thighs or your butt or your stomach, whatever it is. I was still dealing with deep rooted self-esteem and self-worth issues that were manifesting in my relationship with my body. And so I decided for the first time that I wasn't going to just start chasing more things out there and that it was time for me to start to begin to heal my relationship with my body because I had grown up throughout elementary school and high school and university suffering from very disordered eating habits. I was anorexic for a very long time, and then I was bulimic in university, and I was over exercising in phases, and the pendulum would swing between, you know, eating everything in sight so that I could get it out of my system, and then I would be over it, and then I could get back on the wagon, to then falling off the wagon again and again and again, and then pushing myself in between, and the pendulum would swing back and forth year over year, multiple times a year, where it was like up 10 pounds, down 10 pounds, up 5 pounds, down 10 pounds, up 20 pounds, down 15 pounds. It was the constant cycle. And it was fueled by events, right? It was like, I got to look good for this person's wedding, and then I got to go look good for bikini season. And it was this never ending hamster wheel of convincing myself that this time it would be different. This time I would figure out how to make it stick. And then once it could stick and I could lose the 10 pounds, then I'd finally feel happy, right? I'd make it. And it was this ongoing feeling that happiness was just 10 pounds away, right? But that 10 pounds was never within reach. And if I had it, I would lose it. And if I got it, I would still feel like it's not enough, right? It was like, okay, yeah, I lost the 10 pounds, but now I want to have ab definition. And it was like, anybody can have ab definition. Now I want to have a six pack. And the marker just kept on moving, right? And I was driven by this need to just keep pushing myself to get to this ideal standard that I had curated for myself that eventually I realized I would never get to because it was never enough, right? It was never enough. And so that really began the journey of me starting to come home to some semblance of myself. It took about a year to 18 months for me to really approach the journey of my wellness differently, to abandon the timelines for real, like not the pretend kind where you're like, yeah, I'm like doing this for wellness, but secretly you're like, oh my God, and then I'll have a six pack by December. Like to really abandon the timelines and to say, this is going to be about my strength instead of my size. This is going to be about fueling my body with nutrition, not counting calories so that I can see if I made it under 1,000 every day. This is going to be about learning to connect myself to my body so that I can start to hear what it's trying to tell me as opposed to overriding it all the time. And very quickly, I started to feel the seeds of like a new journey being planted. And I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing in its professional sense at the time. I wasn't a personal trainer or nutrition specialist at the time. But what was starting to become clear to me was that I was deeply passionate about this journey that I was on. And the more that I was allowing myself to feel passionate about my journey, the more I was starting to awaken to this feeling of deeply wanting to help people in their journeys and wanted to just sort of find a way to start speaking to people about my journey and the learnings that I was uncovering. And I wanted to find a way to just help people feel less alone in the war against themselves. And so I started to consider the idea of becoming a personal trainer and nutrition specialist. I did my courses on the side while I was still working. And to make a long story short, I ended up sort of falling ass backwards into a portfolio of clients here in downtown Toronto. And one client turned into 13 clients. And pretty soon I was doing two jobs at the same time where I'd wake up at 4:00 in the morning, train clients till 8, do my corporate job until 6, 7:30, start training clients again, do it till 10, go home, sleep, rinse and repeat. And it sounds like a lot, but it was so important and so exciting for me because something was waking up inside. There was this knowing, there was this clarity that I was gaining around my purpose and how much I felt empowered by working with people. And it didn't matter that I was tired and it didn't matter that it all was too much. It just was like, oh, all I want to do is this. And so then it was kind of like the wedding moment, but in a different way, where I brought myself to a point where the truth was undeniable. I couldn't deny how I felt anymore. And I knew that the only responsibility I had towards myself was to give it a chance, like a real chance. You know, all the stories I had told myself about, why I couldn't call off the wedding were no different than all the stories I had told myself about why I couldn't quit my corporate career, right? My parents, the fear, the image, what's going to happen? Nobody does this. It's a ludicrous idea. What about the money? I was the breadwinner at the time, supporting my husband through residency. If I wasn't going to be the breadwinner, how was it going to happen? But the universe works in such beautiful, mysterious ways, right? I had built myself up through that chapter of multitasking and doing both jobs to be able to actually let go of my corporate career with no financial implications, right? And so I got to a point where even I couldn't believe my own bullshit. The scary stories I was telling myself about why I couldn't do it, the financial implications that would lead me to stay stuck, none of them applied anymore. And so I had to get to a place where I could call myself out of my own bullshit and be like, either you want to take a chance on you and what feels right in your deepest sense of self, or you're okay. You're willing to just continue to perform your way through life. You're willing to avoid the call. And it was yet another moment for me where I was like, no, I can't. It's silly to say, but it's like, it almost felt like there was no choice because I had touched that truth. And once I had felt it, there was no way to deny it. And so I quit the corporate world. I took a couple months. My husband was actually doing a little stint in Brazil. I went to Brazil, lived there for a few months, built my website, built sort of my offering, and then launched myself into the world of social media to sort of just start to see where this could go. I had no direction. I had no clarity around what the long-term objective was. I just knew that I wanted to connect with people and help people somehow. And this is how old the story goes and how old I am. It was, the days of Facebook. And so I remember being like, okay, I'm going to start on Facebook, and maybe if by the end of the first year I can set a goal to hit, 5,000 people online, then maybe that'll be, the data that I need to reinforce that I've got a voice here that people can connect with. And in the first month, we, I think, had gotten to maybe 10 or 15,000. And by the end of the first year, I'd hit 250,000. And that, I think, was the inertia that I needed to start to explore the media side of things, wanting to, again, have a bigger impact, find a different avenue to connect with people. That's when I started moving to the media side of things. And then from the media side of things, it was the speaking side of things. Speaking side of things ended up being the book side of things. And here we are today.
What an incredible, oh my goodness. That just, honestly, it fuels my heart, and just, it's so relatable. It's so empowering and inspiring. And I know I keep saying that and I sound like a broken record, but it really is, because you've had to go through so much, but you took a chance on yourself. Choosing you meant stepping into the unknown time and time again. And something that I say all the time is a life beyond your wildest dreams exists on the other side of fear.
Yes.
And you kept choosing that, even in maybe those turn back moments.
Yep.
That so many people, they can't get past that.
It's hard.
You kept walking forward in everything that you just mentioned, and everything kept evolving and evolving.
Yep.
And that's how you know too that you're aligned and you're on the right path, because you can't listen to your bullshit anymore, because as you said, you've touched the truth.
Yep.
And once you take the glasses off,
Yes.
you can't put them back on.
Nope.
You see it, and you're betraying yourself when you
Yes.
don't continue to take that aligned action.
So true.
And something that you actually say, and you say it a lot in your book, and I never thought of it this way, is I always say potential is nothing without action. But you say potential, or you say action requires intention.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so incredible. And everything that you've done, you've been so intentional, because you followed that touch of truth,
Mm-hmm.
that feel good, and it's
Mm-hmm.
brought you here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's brought you to creating this incredible toolkit, this book that shares this journey, that unpacks so many different things, practical takeaways in all aspects. And then part of what you said too was this sort of perfectionist
Mm-hmm.
mentality. I struggle with this a lot.
Me
and
too.
So many people do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to touch on that first before we touch on the rest of what you've mentioned, because you did say a lot of good stuff, and I heard you and I felt you that whole time.
We're going to go wherever you want to go. We're going to touch upon it all. So let's start in one direction. And, this is the thing that's so great about podcasts that I love, is it's you pull on a little thread, we start in one direction and we go where we're going to go,
right.
And it all comes out. So it's perfect.
Perfect. So in regards to perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
this is something that a lot of people struggle with. This is something you talk a lot about in your book, something that I've struggled with as well. And I feel like when you are sort of a recovering perfectionist, or someone who's really trying to break free from that, it's really hard to break free fully. So
Yes.
Can you unpack perfectionism a little bit in terms of what can, in your opinion, maybe bring that on? And how does that impact what we do in our life?
Yeah, perfectionism, my goodness. I mean, and I talk about it so much in my book because it's something that I have struggled with my whole life, and I'm still a recovering perfectionist. I think I'm going to be a recovering perfectionist until I'm dead. I think those programs and paradigms and systems and beliefs that we develop in our earliest years, in the container that we were raised in the experiences that we have as we go through, high school and university and all that sort of stuff. I think, so many of those patterns become patterns, almost reflexes, and we
Mhm.
don't realize that perfectionism is in fact becoming a toxic driver in our lives, right? And I think for me, when I look at perfectionism, I really feel the polarity of it because on one hand, there is the pursuit of excellence. And being a perfectionist in many ways can be productive because you are committed to doing your best and following through and getting the job done and it requires taking action and there's a standard that you're looking to hit. And so it can translate to some really excellent output that's tangible. But on the other end of that pendulum is the fear and the deep seated not good enoughness and the inability to exercise compassion and a gentle touch with yourself. It is the container for procrastination and then hyperdrive action, right? Because unless you're perfect, unless it's perfect, unless you feel like you're going to be able to do it to that perfect standard, you are stuck in the vortex of your own narratives, convincing yourself that it's not the right time, that you can't do it yet, that, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm not ready. And that becomes such a paralyzing state to be in, right? And then there's judgment around it and there's shame around it because like that you should be moving with vigor and action because the high performance version of who you are is like, let's go, let's go, let's go. But the other aspect of who you are is crippled by fear because you're like, oh my God, but it's too big, it's too scary, it's not going to be good enough, I'm not good enough. And I think, for me, one of the ahas that I had around perfectionism is that it isn't about being excellent. It is about the fear of not being good enough as you are. It's an external lens, right? There is something I can achieve out there that's going to make me feel good enough in here. And it's that belief system that we carry that fuels the perfectionism, right? It brings it deeper and deeper at that cellular level because you just continue the hamster wheel cycle, right? Of procrastinating, then doing, then hitting the mark, then being excellent, then burning out, then procrastinating again, then, it's that same cycle again and again and again. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting. I think the core for me of perfectionism is something that I continue to work on myself every day. It's an everyday journey for me still, is breaking this idea that there is anything that I can do or accomplish or achieve out there that's going to make me feel better in here. And so every day, it is a reminder for me to break the cycle of doing and cultivate the cycle of being. But it's so hard. It's so hard, right? Because we are bombarded with perfectionism online. We are bombarded with perfectly curated images, perfect authenticity, perfect vulnerability because it's like just enough without being like gross and messy to the point that we're like, ooh, that person's version of vulnerability is the one that I want, right? We are searching out there for perfect use cases that we can emulate. And all of that continues to pull us further and further away from the being that we are inside. And so perfectionism when it comes to wellness is, crippling for most people. It is the seed that then creates the on the wagon, off the wagon system, right? I'm going to push, I'm going to achieve, I'm going to win. But if I can't do it the all or nothing way, then I'm going to fall off the wagon. I'm going to self-sabotage. I'm going to get it all in. And then I'm going to get back on the wagon, convincing myself that this time I'll be able to crack the code perfectly. When the reality is, like, we're not robots, right? And we know that. We know that we should be doing it differently. And yet for so many of us, it's so hard to break free from that inner tension of wanting to finally get there, lose the 10 pounds, get the promotion, finally land the dream man, whatever it is, right? We believe that there's something out there that's going to help us feel good inside. And it's that relentless pursuit of perfection that keeps us stuck, regardless of whether it's about your career or your relationship or your body, right?
Isn't it? It's so incredible how it can impact every aspect of our life. And how, as you said, the polarity, the crippling fear aspect of it, and then this striving for excellence, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is that fear and focusing less on doing and more on being.
Right.
But who are we outside of what we do?
Right.
How do we focus on that being and tuning out the external noise?
I think for me, this continues to be, as I was saying, like a daily practice. And it truly is a practice for me, because the second that I am operating based off my default programming, my old operating system takes over and I'm right back into the same doing perfectionism cycle. And so for me, it is a daily practice to be able to connect with my truth, connect with my body, connect with the data and the information that my body is trying to share with me, my emotions, my feelings, to be able to drop out of the headiness and the stories and the lies and the fear and the narratives and the ongoing debate of all the different parts of who I am, and to be able to land back into a deeper part of me, that knowing, so that I can lead with intention, as you said, right? That I can create aligned action for myself that is based on honest intention, not the stories that I'm telling myself to keep myself in a fear-based high performance action mode, right?
Mhm.
And so I think for everybody, it involves exploration. And I say exploration because for some people, the journey of dropping into who you really are is going to be relatively effortless and relatively easy. And for some people, it's going to be major heavy lifting. And so it's going to be important to find your tools on how to be able to connect mind and body, to be able to get to the core of your truth and who you are. For some people, that's meditation. For some people, that's breath work. For some people, it's journaling. For some people, it's dancing. For some people, it's exercise. For some people, it's cold plunging. For some people, it's reading. For some people, it's affirmations. There are so many tools that we can use to be able to get out of our heads and into our bodies. And I know I keep emphasizing the getting into your body, getting into your body, getting into your body. But I think so many of us have heard this now presented in different ways. Ultimately, it's the body that keeps the score. It's the body that is driving your nervous system to feel a certain way. And that nervous system is sending messages to your brain. And your brain is then finding reasons to rationalize why your nervous system feels the way that it does. And oftentimes, that whole journey involves breaking out of your head and into your body so that you can connect with something that is more honest that is more vulnerable and that isn't just the protective systems you've created for yourself in your head to keep you moving the way you have been moving, right? We
Mhm.
want to always be moving in the direction of what's familiar because familiar is safe, even if we hate it, right? That's why we will continue to find ourselves in the same cycle again and again and again, because the beliefs that we carry are subconscious. And every time we don't operate from that aligned knowing, that aligned being that we are, we're just operating ourselves through that same belief system that is going to bring you back to the same destination that it knows every single time, whether you like it or you don't, right? You may hate the fact that you always fall off the wagon, but if falling off the wagon is the belief that you hold in your subconscious, right? That you believe that, sure, you can lose 5 pounds, but then you always fall off the wagon. It will happen time and time and time again until you can find a way to break out of that belief system. And the first way to do that, and the most important way to do that, is to drop into your knowing in your body.
I have goosebumps and chills, and I got so emotional during you saying that, and I keep saying it's so relatable. It is so relatable, and it's so honest and touching, and it's kind of what you said, how these things are laid out in so many different ways, and sometimes all it takes is hearing it a certain way for it to really sink in,
Yeah,
and in a way that you understand it.
absolutely.
And you're saying to really get in touch with that knowingness, and something you talk about a lot is you ask and you encourage people to create this mindset manifesto, which I
Mm-hmm.
really want you to dive into because I
Sure.
think so many people could really benefit from that.
Yep.
But it also is so aligned to your values, where your discernment becomes stronger when you know what you value. The perfectionist tendencies sort of dissipate when you know what you value, because
Yes.
your core values, your purest intentions will lead the way
That's
over
exactly it.
fear.
That's exactly it.
So can you dive in a little bit
Yes,
more?
I certainly can. And I think you hit the nail on the head so precisely, right? It's why in the book, we start with the conversation around values and then move on to beliefs and then dive into perfectionism. It's so easy to feel like, well, it's like values. So like whatever. It's very like topical,
Yeah.
It feels almost irrelevant when you say the word values because it feels too broad, too big, and like a bit abstract. But in reality, the way I like to look at values is almost as if they are my evaluation criteria. You know, so often, especially when we're dealing with, high performance individuals who have goals and dreams and things, and, they're pushing forward and they're doing and they're doing and they're doing. So often we get stuck in that chase to accomplish, to do, to da 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 da, because we are, again, operating based off of old ideas that we have been taught through our upbringing, ideas that have been reinforced through our conditioning in school, what we have seen in society, what we continue to see on social media. All of those aspects influence what we think we need to be doing in our lives. And along the way, we often don't realize that these beliefs, these values, these things that we are looking to satisfy are not actually our own, right? And so if we don't have clarity on what we truly care about, like truly, not what sounds good,
Mhm.
but what is actually aligned and important for our vision of our highest selves, then how can you possibly know what you're supposed to be doing? Whether it's about your body, whether it's about your career or your relationships, if you don't know what you stand for or what you want to stand for or the criteria that you'd like to satisfy so that every day you can be like, I'm on track. Or at the end of the year, you can be like, I'm on track. then how are you going to know? What, are you going to wing it? Well, yeah, actually you are, because that's what most adults are doing. Most adults are not stopping to ask themselves the tough questions. They are actually just operating based on legacy values that they picked up along the way, trying to continuously satisfy criteria that's not actually their own. And so that's where the disconnect comes. That's where the dissonance comes, right? That feeling of misalignment, that feeling, that longing, that haunting feeling that I was talking about earlier. It's because you're not actually moving in alignment. You're overriding to satisfy other people's expectations that you believe are your own. And so the Mindset Manifesto, for me, can be done in so many different ways. And I have a full sort of like resource workbook that's available in my Momentum portal, which is free, so anyone can have it. It's a guide that'll take you through this exercise. And I think, when you sort of look at it, you'll understand in a lot of detail what the intention behind the exercise is, and then you'll be able to customize it for yourself so that it actually lands. Because again, I am like not about doing fake work for the sake of doing work. We want everything through this book and this journey to feel like it's just like a little guidepost here and there for you to be able to see what's worked for me so that you can do it your way for you. But the essential principles of the Mindset Manifesto are to get super clear on who you are, what your vision for your highest self looks like, feels like, smells like, tastes like. And then to be able to create a declaration of that to yourself as a touchstone or a touch point that you can use in your daily life to keep you anchored. And so the exercise involves first just sort of thinking through what's important to you. What do you stand for? What do you care about as the adult that you are now? And then we go through a visualization exercise where you play out the movie in your head of your ideal self. So I wake up in the morning, my feet touch the floor. What does that floor feel like? What am I wearing? Okay, go to the washroom. What do I want that to feel like? Okay, get ready. What do I want that to feel like? Who am I with? What am I eating? How do I feel as I'm moving through the world? How do I experience myself? How am I spending my time and energy? What does that look like in terms of my relationships? You play that movie out in as much detail as you can, really focusing on the feeling of that as opposed to the headiness and the ideas of it, but really cultivating that feeling like, how do I want to feel when I'm going to move through the world as this highest version of who I am? And you let that movie play out in your head for as long as it feels good. And then when you're ready and it feels complete, you verbal diarrhea onto a piece of paper, everything that came to mind. Who were you with? What were you eating? How did it feel? You collect that data, and through that, you uncover a declaration of self. And for some people, that's like a Dear Diary letter to themselves of this highest version of who they are. And for some people, it's like 2 lines. It's 2 precise lines that they keep on their phone that becomes the touchstone for them throughout their days, whether they read it in the morning, whether they read it at night, whether they read it throughout. Eventually, it becomes something that you usually only look at probably once a week. I like to read mine every Sunday before the new week starts. And again, it's just a simple but very powerful tool to keep you connected to your highest intentions rather than getting caught up in the tug of war between you and the world around you. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And the way that you've positioned that makes it so simple.
So simple.
It's hard work. It can be painful to explore and really ask certain questions and, face this reality of maybe having to abandon old beliefs to cultivate what we want for our highest selves, as you say. And you mentioned how maybe you start by reading it more frequently. You
Mhm.
like to read it every Sunday,
Mhm.
and it helps keep us anchored to the outside world. But something that you talk about a lot in your book too is the hashtag world. So, social media, for instance, it's such a beautiful thing, and it's such a scary place all at the same time. With this mindset manifesto, once we've had this sense of who we are, we've built this sense of who we are. In your opinion, how do we continue to trust in that belief while being submerged in this hashtag world? Because let's be honest, just reading it once a week, when we're in the face of this every day and then we doom scroll and we do all that, it can be really quick to throw out the window.
It really can. And I think this is actually just the perfect sort of lead into the next part of the book, where we talk about beliefs and limiting beliefs. Because, we've got evaluation criteria that we're clear on, the representation of our values through our mindset manifesto. And yes, that's like very important foundational work. But then we've got all of the stories and the lies that we're carrying around about who we are. And it's those stories and those lies that are driving our behaviors, our actions, our choices, our decisions. And it's so critical that we continue to develop more and more awareness towards those beliefs and those stories and those lies that we tell ourselves. Because as we develop that awareness, we are then able to catch them as they are distorting our reality in the moment, right? And it's not an easy process, right? So this isn't like, oh, I read my mindset manifesto once a week and now I'm healed. That is the starting place for then doing the ongoing daily work of catching and releasing your negative narratives. And I have a way that I do this for myself that has become so therapeutic for me and so therapeutic for the clients that I work with because it really works. And so I'd love to share that with you if you don't mind. I think
Absolutely.
it could be helpful for everyone listening. As I said, the first step is to create that mind body connection, right? To be able to drop into a little bit of presence, however you need to do that, and to have clarity on your values. Then from that container, we're talking about the day to day. And it requires day to day the ability to tune in to how you're feeling. And again, for me, that's driven by how my body's feeling. And so, I'll be doing a meeting or I'll be, gearing up for a TV segment or something or another. And I will in moments feel that tension in my tummy, or like my shoulders are getting tight, or like my chest is starting to get tight. And I'm having that like,
Yeah.
feeling, it's like that buzzy feeling a little bit. And in that moment, as soon as I can clock it, whatever it is, whatever the signal is that my body has given me to be like, oh my God, bitch, you're stressed, is when I will take out a piece of paper and I will, without thinking about it, just verbal diarrhea out everything that is coming to mind in that moment. Oh my God, I'm scared. What if I don't do well enough? I don't know what's going to happen. Oh my God, my taxes. Like, I will just unleash onto paper anything that is floating around in my mind in that moment, and I will just release it on paper. And then as soon as that's done, I don't read it. I don't do anything with it. I put it away because there's already a catharsis that comes from just letting it out on paper. It's almost like in letting it out on paper, there's like a relief in the body that's like, whew. And also the worry and the fear and the overdrive in the mind dissipates because it's almost like you can be like, okay, yeah, but I know that it's on paper. So I've
Mhm.
got it. So I can worry about it later. I can come back to this and worry about it later. I can come back to this and dwell on it later. I can come back to this and feel bad about it later. but I've captured it. So I don't need to keep like telling it to myself again in my head mentally right now. It's there. And so I'll go about my day. I'll handle the rest of my stuff. I'm already feeling better because I've released. And then that night, after the kids go to bed and my husband is asleep, usually I will wait for a moment where I feel like, okay, I've got the bandwidth for this. And I will do two things. First thing is I will read my verbal diarrhea. And I won't read it and critique it or do anything with it. I just read it so that I can literally come back to the place that I was in earlier. And then the second step to this is I will read it with a little bit of distance as the adult that I really am. And I will interrogate everything that I have written. I will find rebuttals. I will give myself the evidence from my real adult life as to why the stories, the beliefs, the lies that I have written down on this paper are not in fact true. Or if they are true, or certain things about them are true, I will find compassionate narratives or compassionate ways of reframing the thing that I'm scared about, worried about, stressed about, so that I feel like, again, adult Sonia's in the driver's seat. And so what comes out of this exercise usually is a couple of new affirmations that are precisely targeting the underlying stress, fear, and noise that I'm carrying. So this isn't like bullshit like live, laugh, love, and wherever you go, there you are. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to like say this stuff to myself in the morning and then I'm going to like feel better. This is me really honoring the stuff that I'm carrying right now in my head, in my body, and then finding language that I can really believe in to rebut those negative narratives. And so then the next morning, those new affirmations become what I lead with when I do either my affirmations or my meditation or breath work or anything. That's the language I'm using to help better respond to how I'm really feeling. And through that, there becomes a really positive cycle of me being able to show up for myself differently, me being able to soothe myself differently, and me being able to feel really clear that I've caught the narratives. I'm no longer available for those narratives. I don't want them anymore. And that I'm taking deliberate action to continuously reinforce new beliefs and narratives that then get further synthesized by my actions, decisions, and choices. And so this is where we look at the first step being the mindset manifesto. Who do you want to be as your highest self? And how do you want that to feel? And what is going to be the evaluation criteria that you are going to benchmark yourself against so that you know that you're moving in the right direction? And then we move on to the second step, which is the day-to-day is going to be shitty, it's going to be messy, and it's going to be hard because you are not a robot. So then how are you going to take responsibility of moving the needle forward on the voices and the noise and the truths and lies that you are discerning between in your head so that you can every day say, okay, heard it, get it, don't want to feel that way, and choosing to no longer believe the stories that I've been telling myself. And so here's my new story. Here is my new narrative. Here is the route that I'm going to be taking so that I can start to shift the programming, shift the operating system. And yes, I know that everything I'm saying now sounds like your whole full-time job is going to be listening to the noise and then writing it down and then having the crisis moment, and it becomes like even more vortexy. It's not like that, because over the course of doing this for myself and clients for years, what I have deeply come to appreciate is that the hard work is calling yourself to the moment where you're willing to do the work. The work itself becomes easier and easier every day because it becomes more intrinsic. It becomes the call and response that you actually need. You really get good at it very quickly. And then suddenly you find yourself feeling differently than you've ever felt before. and the self-sabotaging behaviors are no longer creating that chokehold in your life, that predetermined place that you always end up where you're falling off the wagon and feeling like shit, suddenly that cycle doesn't have as much of a place in your life anymore. And while these behaviors and patterns don't break away overnight, slowly, slowly, we find an easier route to letting them go.
You provide such a practical way of being able to take on everything head on. And it's difficult, but it's so practical and so insightful. And I'm
Thank
so grateful that you were willing to share all of that,
you. Of
because I
course.
feel like you get so many people that talk about it like, oh, you have to feel like this or you can't feel like this, but nobody really breaks down how do we do it and what does it really entail?
Yeah.
What is the dark side of what comes out of that? What do we actually do? And with that, and we are running close to time, and I really would love to chat with you all
Oh,
day
you're
and
so
hours
sweet.
long, but once we've rewired our operating system, once we've decided that we're going to live in our truth, we want to lead with conviction and reach this place of our highest self. Let's talk about quickly the people around us, our
Mhm.
inner circle. Sometimes we have people in our life who have different mentalities than we do
Yep.
because they're stuck in their own ways and their own versions and
Yep.
so on. How do we cultivate relationships that are more in alignment with this new wiring, but also how do we maintain while being unable to remove certain people in our life who just don't align with our new mindset?
It's a tough question and a really important one because, as you said, like we're not living in isolation. And,
Yes.
there are going to be people who have a hard time experiencing the shifts and changes that may come as you start to do this work for yourself. I think this is, again, just another area where we have to really lead with the inner knowing of calling ourselves to question, are we performing in our relationships? Have we been performing in our relationships? Do we want to continue performing in our relationships? And if the idea is to cultivate more authenticity and to be able to feel good with the people around you, then we have to look at the evaluation criteria again and see who gets to stay. And as you said, a lot of times people are going to stay regardless, right? We're not always in a position to be like, you no longer align, I'm cutting you out.
Right.
But then the question is, what are you available for in that relationship? How are you going to stay connected to what feels good for you? And then how are you going to cultivate the courage to be vulnerable enough to ask for what you need, to allow someone to be on the journey with you? And that can feel challenging because we're all at different stages. And so I'll use myself as an example. Like I have been deeply in the thick of my healing journey for years now, but in particular, I'd say the last 2 years, it has been like dark and heavy. And my journey is very complicated. It's not something that I can expect my husband to be able to understand in every moment the way I need him to understand, or to, push him to be as dedicated to his healing journey as I am for mine and to be able to keep pace with my work, right? Like there is inherently an aloneness to the journey that we go on when we go within. But to find that balance for yourself, what can you share? How can you lead by example? How can you bring someone into your journey where you feel like you're not alone, but also that you're not expecting them to be able to do the heavy lifting with you or for you, right? And I think, again, that comes back to your intentions for yourself. How can you cultivate that self-reliance and that reparenting of yourself so that you're not trying to grasp it and reach for it from other people. But also then, how can you lean into the people around you and include them in your journey so that you're not struggling through this on your own as an island, right? That happy medium, that sweet spot is going to be so deeply personal for each individual. And so the only thing I can really suggest here is give yourself the time and space as you go along on this journey to feel it out and to connect with that knowing inside that tells you who can you bring on the journey with you and who does need to maybe take a back seat, who does need to be maybe paused for a little while so that you can see how the new version of you is going to align with who they are. And there may be turbulence along the way, but I think as long as you're clear on how you want to feel in your relationships, you will have a guidepost to how you need to show up in the relationships. And that'll be then the opportunity to see if these relationships can meet you where you now are. And in many cases, the answer is going to be yes, they can. And in some cases, it's going to be this no longer serves you. And it's tough and it's scary. But my experience has shown me that the more vulnerable and honest I can be about the dark side of my journey, the more the people around me are really willing to offer me more compassion than I can offer myself as a recovering perfectionist, a gentle touch in a way that I still struggle with, and just the feeling that I'm not alone in my pain, and that continues to go so deep for me on my own healing journey. And I'm continuing to have to push myself to let it land in my nervous system that I am not alone in my pain, that I am not supposed to be able to heal on my own and fix myself on my own so that I don't bother anybody else, but that I can really lean in to my network of support and let this be a journey of healing together.
So profound and so beautifully said. And I really feel like everything you've said today has such powerful intention behind it. But I feel like that message is really a message that a lot of people are really going to resonate with.
So good.
So thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that.
Of course.
And I know we really are at the end, but I have one final question and I
Yes.
hope you can answer so quick. Your journey is incredible, as I mentioned, and you've come so far. What would your 21-year-old self say to you if she saw you right now?
Oh, I'm getting emotional. I think she would be, I think she'd be pretty blown away by where her and I have come. And I think she would be really proud of my commitment to doing the work. And I think she would also encourage me to let it be light, to let it be good, and to let it be easy in moments. Because I think for me the journey still continues, and it's both beautiful and very heavy. And I think she would want me to be able to find a little bit more lightness along the way. So yeah, I think here we are. I think it's pretty outstanding I turned 40 this year. And to really sort of be sitting here at 40 looking at sort of where this journey began and where I've gotten to at this chapter of my life, it feels surreal, and it feels unbelievable. And also I'm like, oh my God, dear God, when does it get easier? And also I'm like, it doesn't. It doesn't get easier, but there's more moments of beauty and ease and joy. And I look forward to more of them.
Absolutely. So beautiful. And Sonia, I just want to say thank you for your courage and your vulnerability and just your journey. And as I mentioned right at the top of the podcast, it was essential for you to be where you are today to share this,
Yeah.
everything you've gone through. Thank you for cultivating such a beautiful community, even among women. That is something that's so difficult because so many women tear other women down, and so many women want to see others rise.
Yes.
And I really believe that you embrace that, you emulate that, and I think a lot of women feel very heard by you
I'm
and
so
they hear you, and you are so worthy and
no.
enough. And so just thank you for everything, for
Thank
your
you.
light. And I genuinely long for all the abundance for you, that everything manifests more than what you want, so long as it serves your higher self.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, your
Thank
energy, and
you.
your presence. And I am just so grateful.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a beautiful container for today's conversation. And you're doing all the things. You are leading the way for these conversations. You
Thank
are
you.
touching the hearts of so many. And it's such an honor to be able to just share this moment with you. I'm so honored, really.
Thank you, Sonia.